Hello my friends, and let's start right away with the Kherson direction. Here, the Ukrainian Armed Forces are successful. No statements are being made, so all information about this direction is formed only from Russian complaints and some reports from the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Today, the occupiers write that the situation remains difficult for them.
The situation in the Krynky area remains difficult. Constant fierce assaults on the enemy's positions have not yet brought the desired results. The enemy has not only not been thrown off the bridgehead, but is also expanding the zone of his control. At the same time, in these senseless assaults, our combat units are actively grinding down. We do not want to write specific figures here so as not to please the enemy's propagandists, but we will cite one fact. Only 161st Marine Brigade, whose units are fighting in the Krynky area, recently received reinforcements in the amount of 3 companies to make up for losses.
As seen, the increase in Russian losses is confirmed by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. For yesterday, there were again over 1,000 destroyed occupiers along the entire front line. And this is almost every day. Hence, they have constant regrouping and rotation. However, it's challenging to say how much human resources Russia still has. Although not all correspondents tell the truth, and many show a map like this, claiming that even Krynky is under Russian control, and they have the initiative in this direction, which doesn't correspond to reality. At the same time, Russian generals argue that Russia should capture Mykolaiv and Odessa.
Нам нужно обязательно Николаевская, Одесская область, как это обязательно, для того, чтобы не допустить мотивации НАТО, Запада, взять ее в НАТО, Украину.
It's interesting how they plan to do that when they even have to retreat from the left bank. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, an intriguing situation is unfolding. Occupiers continue assaults in the areas of Bohdanivka and Verbove. Yesterday evening, the General Staff announced that for some reason the Russians shelled the village of Kopany. There is a possibility that details are not disclosed yet, but the Ukrainian Armed Forces are attempting to advance in this direction. Perhaps the Russians simply launched rockets at their own again, which is also not excluded. However, honestly, looking at the map with the marking of the Russian defense line today, it can be seen that essentially by fighting near Verbove, the Russians are trying to regain control over the lost piece of the first and most crucial defense line. In this way, they aim to nullify the main success of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. For this task, the Russians continue to deploy reserves here and advance to squeeze our forces from positions. In the Bohdanivka direction, the Russians couldn't achieve any successes in the Novodonetsk area, and attacks have ceased for today. However, shelling across the entire front line continues. In the Avdiivka direction, the battles persist. Occupiers managed to break closer to Bakhmutivka, but the Ukrainian Armed Forces don't let them secure their positions, so the fights continue. The fights near Stepove have stopped. The Russians couldn't advance, and the Ukrainian Armed Forces successfully repelled all attacks. The situation is challenging near the Krynky chemical plant, but the Ukrainian Armed Forces are doing everything to prevent the Russians from capturing it. Intense battles continue. In the industrial zone, the Russians changed the direction of attacks and attempt to break through near the railway. they don't achieve success and the front line remains unchanged over the day. On the southern flank, the Ukrainian Armed Forces successfully repelled Russian attacks in the southern area. However, attacks on Tonnenki persist, accompanied by a significant amount of shelling. Apparently, they are trying to extend this section of the front to the village itself to move towards Avdiivka and connect the two front lines. For now, there is a distance of 6 kilometers and 100 meters between them. In Pervomaisk, the fighting also continues, but the Russians don't succeed here. Further south, occupiers intensively advance with several groups attempting to squeeze the Ukrainian Armed Forces from the last streets to declare the complete capture of Bohdanivka. However, the Ukrainian Armed Forces stand in defense and the battles continue. Additionally, there are attacks on Novomykhailivka, but the Russians have no success here either. The front line remains unchanged. In the Bakhmut direction, the occupiers continue to advance across the entire front line. The most challenging situation is in the area of Bohdanivka, where the occupiers have reached the outskirts of the village and are attempting to progress further. Battles have also resumed in the direction of Ivanivska, and attacks persist in the areas of Klishchiivka and Avdiivka. Meanwhile, a significant amount of shelling continues across the entire front line. In the Solidar area, the Ukrainian Armed Forces successfully repelled all attacks and the front line remains unchanged. Near Krynyky and Siversk, the number of shelling incidents remains high. Unfortunately, the Russians managed to break closer to the village of Terne, and the battles are practically on the outskirts. Nevertheless, the Ukrainian Armed Forces are doing everything to prevent the Russians from securing positions in the fields near the village. The front line remains unchanged over the day. In the Svatovo direction, the situation remains stable as before. There is a small number of shelling, but no new attacks are recorded and the front line remains unchanged. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians continue their offensive actions near Sinkivka and shell across the entire front line. There are no changes and the Ukrainian Armed Forces successfully repel all attacks. In general, we are not losing spirit and the fight continues. However, a lot of weapons are needed. Today, more evidence is emerging online that Russians are using FPV drones on some fronts, even if a military operator is alone.
The enemy began to use night FPV drones, even one infantry unit at a time. Presumably, the Russian Federation is increasing the production and modification of FPV drones at the state level. We need to do the same and do it at the state level, not just by volunteers. The same goes for countering drones.
I also want to show you how two dictators who started two wars are trying to portray themselves on the bright side and blame the USA for everything.
И еще вызывает более сожаление то, что международные организации, те организации, которые должны защищать права человека, они потеряли свою эффективность. И это происходит на глазах у всего мирового сообщества.
About the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Tell me, name me one more nation, any other nation, that's doing as much as the United States to alleviate the pain and suffering of the people of Gaza. You can't. You just can't. The United States, through President Biden, is leading the effort to get trucks, food, water, medicine, and fuel into the people of Gaza. Wait. Name another nation that's doing as more than the United States to get hostages out or to get people, foreign nationals, out of Gaza. You can't do it. And name another nation that is doing more to urge the Israeli counterparts, our Israeli counterparts, to be as cautious and deliberate as they can be in the prosecution of their military operations. You can't. The United States is at the forefront of this. Now,
And that's all from me. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.